Opinions stated by various contributors to the Money and Business Show and related programs are not to be considered as endorsed by Radio Shalom, its employees. Visitors to this program are urged to use their own discernment to draw their own conclusions. Please read your prospectus and consult with your own investment advisor.
Live from the studios of Radio Shalom, 1650 AM in Montreal, Canada, the city of Joie de Vivre, the world capital of culinary variety, and the home of the Montreal Canadiens. This is the Money and Business Show with your host, Samuel Izerzer. Every week, Samuel and his guests discuss money, investments, financial services, and the world economy. Over the next hour, you can have your questions about business and personal finances answered. So call 514-738-4100 extension 200 to speak with Samuel and his guests. And now, here is the host of the Money and Business Show, Samuel Izerzer.
Money, money, and business. Everything Montana Senator Max Baucus touches seems to create work for lawyers and accountants. The Democratic chairman of the powerful U.S. Senate Finance Committee was the driving force behind several rounds of bitter Canada-U.S. lumber wars in the 1980s and 1990s. Armies of lawyers built their careers on that dispute. Mr. Baucus is also the author of a bill that's about to make life very unsettling for Americans living in Canada and their financial institutions. The Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, which is called FACTA. The law, which takes effect 100% in 2014, is the hammer behind the U.S. crackdown on offshore tax cheats. When he unveiled the legislation 3 years ago, Mr. Baucus said squeezing tax evaders would bring in tens of billions of dollars a year, money that would help reduce the massive U.S. deficit. Canadians are already paying a steep price for Mr. Baucus' law in bureaucracy, aggravation, and especially compliance. Canadian banks, brokers, insurers, and mutual funds companies have begun alerting customers to the impending law, which will require financial institutions to keep tabs on all their American account holders and to remit the information to the U.S. Internal Revenue Service, which is the IRS. So, is Uncle Sam going too far? Today, live from our studios of Radio Shalom in Montreal is Nathan Farkas. He's the owner and founder of Cross Border Tax and Accounting Consulting Firm. He is a CPA, which is Certified Public Accountant, and he will discuss this new law will impact Americans in Canada. What you should do if you are an American who has never filed a tax return. We will also discuss how Americans in Canada can avoid having to pay taxes to Uncle Sam. What types of investments, products, or businesses to avoid. We will also talk about how Canadians can do business in the U.S. while minimizing tax exposure. And finally, we will also discuss a means for Americans in Canada to collect, yes, large refunds from the U.S. while not paying them a penny. So our topic of today is how U.S. tax rules impact Americans in Canada and what Americans and Canadians need to do to avoid the wrath of Uncle Sam. Today we have Nathan Farkas. He's a CPA licensed in New York, Quebec, and Ontario. He manages his own accounting firm specializing in U.S. tax planning for the Canadians and Americans in Canada. The firm assists small Canadians accounting firms which limited exposure to U.S. tax by preparing U.S. returns for them, in addition to maintaining a core group of his own clients. The firm has clients throughout Canada, from the Maritimes to Ottawa to Edmonton to some others in upstate New York as well. He also has over 10 years of experience in the field and has worked in Montreal and New York. In addition, he's also the president-elect of the Adirondack chapter of the New York State Society of the CPAs, a trade group for CPAs in northern New York State. Welcome to our show, Nathan. How are you?
I'm good, Sam. Thanks for having me. There's so much to talk about on this subject that could help the Americans living here in Canada.
Yes, and I'm sure you have a lot to talk about, especially the last part. I just can't wait how American actually can make money off of it. American Canadians can make money off of this. But I understand why the U.S. is trying to cut down on tax evasions, Nathan. But why would banks in Canada or other countries, comply with these rules? The IRS still doesn't have power in Canada to enforce these rules, or do they?
Well, the IRS doesn't have power to enforce these rules in Canada, but one part of this new law that wasn't well reported was the stick that they wield. Almost all banks around the world have investments or do business in the United States. And the profits and the revenues that derive from that business will now be subject to a stiff withholding. Basically, the IRS is going to not allow the banks to take their money out of the United States unless they give in to this approach. Now, if there's a bank that has absolutely no dealings in the United States, they can get away with it. But most banks can't say that nowadays. Also, in Europe, many banks have started telling their American account holders to find another bank to deal with. They're just not worth it in many cases.
So Nathan, just tell me exactly, or tell me, what does FACTA, and I spoke about it a little bit before, mean for the average person?
Well, Sam, you mentioned in the introduction that this law goes 100% into effect in 2014.
Well, that's what it was written.
Right. But
right?
the law has been partially in effect since the 2011 tax filing year.
Oh, it's already been in effect?
A part of it is. Now, the banks have had a few years to do their portion of the compliance, but individuals have been required to report their bank accounts, their investments.
So just a small part of the FACTA is implemented now, but the full effect will come in 2014.
Correct.
Is that what you're saying?
Correct. In 2014, the banks are going to have to start squealing on people who haven't reported themselves. In addition, the State Department has started not submitting new passports to people who are delinquent in their taxes. So with the banks here, they're now going to be helping the Americans find who the tax cheats are. So the
IRS has that much power here in Canada? Obviously, because some of these financial institutions are in the U.S., so they can wield a stick there too.
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Just drive up the east coast of the United States. TD Bank, RBC.
They're all there.
Everybody's there.
And you mentioned the U.S. State Department has begun requiring all passport applicants to provide a Social Security number.
Correct. By requiring that, now the State Department is going to submit that Social Security number to the IRS. They're going to verify if that person has been filing taxes previously, and if not, there's going to be a problem. They will not get their passport renewed.
So, Nathan, stats show there are approximately about 1 million Americans living in Canada. Less than half filed tax returns in prior years. I'm actually surprised it's that high, by the way, Nathan. What can those who have never filed do? Will they be at risk of losing their life savings, Nathan, or going to jail? What can they do? I mean, if they haven't filed. I mean, we're looking at a staggering amount here.
That's true, and yes,
if the stats are right,
there is the risk of losing all their assets or jail, but there are programs out there to help them get into compliance. The first one, for people who have done it intentionally, is the Offshore Voluntary Disclosure Program. It allows the Americans to backfile years of tax returns, bank account reports, and pay a penalty of about 28% of their unreported net worth.
28%?
28%. The second program is a streamlined procedures for people who are not high risk. Basically people who have low incomes, wouldn't owe much tax anyway. So for them, file 3 years of tax returns.
Is it more than $2,000 they owe, or $5,000? Is that what you're talking about? Not like $100,000?
$1,500 per year. If you owe
okay, so if you owe $1,500 a year,
or less,
you're in the second option.
You could go through the second option, file 3 years of tax returns, 6 years of bank account reports, and when they finally go through your papers, you will supposedly be fully compliant and forgiven for all your prior years not filing.
Even if they charge you, what, 28%, they're going to forgive you after that? Is that what you're saying?
For people in this category, you'll pay...
Oh, the second category.
The second category, you'll pay your taxes and interest on your unpaid taxes. That's unavoidable. But penalties will be forgiven, and you're now in compliance going forward. But you have to file going forward.
Is there any more options, or there's just two options here?
Those are the two official options. There's always the option to just file your taxes and hope for the best.
That's the third option, right?
That's the third option out there.
Just send it and just pray.
Right. Now, there are so many people sending returns nowadays. The IRS and a lot of their agents are using common sense in the judging. Is this third option
advisable? Sorry, is this advisable, this third option? Or better to do the first option?
The first option carries a heavy penalty and heavy risk. The third option, I don't generally advise it, because for anyone who's eligible for it could generally get away with, would be better off using the second option. The third option might be for someone who would prefer to gamble on not filing certain number of years returns.
Would they be criminally charged on the third option if they just send it just like that?
Unlikely, because they didn't commit the act of tax evasion. For the most part, they didn't know, or they didn't know that they should have been filing, so they didn't file. When they found out.
But how would they find
filing.
that? Is there an accountant that would just say, hey, there's a red light here and you have to send something? You have to send... Is that when it happens?
Usually what's been happening lately is people are reading the newspapers. They're hearing Senator Baucus go talking
or this
about
show.
what's going on.
Or even
They're
this
hearing
show.
This show. They're hearing all the media reports going on, and they know, okay, I've never filed. It's time to start. What do I do?
And exactly. By the way, what is your contact information if someone wants to know a little bit more on your company?
My phone number is 1-800-905-0380, and my website is ustaxesincanada.com.
Thank you, Nathan. Now we're going to be going to a station break. Again, we have Nathan Farkas, is a CPA licensed in New York and Quebec and Ontario. Again, my name is Samuel Izurza for the Money Visual Radio Show. I'm CJRS 1650 AM in Montreal. We'll be right back.